So now we're ready to actually do a hands-on demonstration of the process of adopting your shelves and coming in and working on those. So first let's talk a little bit about the materials you're going to be using. So our goal is to start with the least amount of cleaning chemicals possible and work our way up from there if needed. So the first thing we do is we use the Swiffer duster wands. And if you've not used one of these before, there are refills around, and you could, if this one was all used up, you could grab a refill. What you're doing is sliding the prongs of the Swiffer right through that, and then you kind of twist it and fluff it up, and that'll make it work. However, we do like to keep using these as much as possible. So even though this one has a little bit of dust on it, we'd still keep using it. So I'm going to go ahead and use that one. If the dust doesn't come up with that, or let's say there's a coffee stain or something sticky on the shelf and you need something a little more powerful, you can use this product. We call it Glance, and you'll see it has a bright green label on it. And this material we use to clean off those extra sticky things, or if there's some dust that just isn't coming up. We also use these green reusable cloths. So you can spray the cloth, clean the shelf, and then put the cloth in the laundry. We actually have some volunteers that help us do laundry here at the library too. Finally, if something is really lodged in there, a good tool that you might use occasionally is this compressed air. That's kind of good for getting into the back corners of the shelves. You can blow that back there and really dislodge that. And if there's a scuff mark or something that's really not coming off with the Glance, we can use the Mr. Clean erasers. You just get the edge of it wet and you scrub it, and then that should bring up any scuff marks. So let's go ahead and clean this shelf. What you'll find is every volunteer kind of has their own way of doing their shelves. You can come up with the method that works best for you, but here's an idea. So when you come up, the first thing you would do is make sure that the top shelf of your cart is empty so that you can start to transfer materials to that. So I'm just going to start transferring materials while trying to keep them in the correct order as much as I can. And we always want to start at the top and work our way down as we're getting rid of the dust. So I'm going to take my Swiffer, and I'm even going to get some of these top bars. So I'm going to come up here with my Swiffer duster and just dust that, and then do the shelf. And you can see the areas behind here were really the dustiest of spots. Now, if there was a spot on here that I really needed to get cleaned, maybe it was a coffee stain or a sticky spot, I'm going to grab the Glance and the rag. What I don't want to do is spray the Glance directly on the shelf, because any overspray is going to hit any books around it, and we don't want chemicals on the books. So when I've got my rag and Glance, I'm going to turn to the side, spray it away from the books, and then bring it up here to wipe down the shelf. So you don't have to wipe down the shelves all the time, just if there's a need. Once the shelf has been cleaned and is dry, then I'm going to go ahead and start putting the books back on. As I do, though, that's when I can start checking book condition. I don't have to go through each book individually. I can just kind of take a look at all the sides of the book and see if I see any problems or concerns. If I don't, I'm just going to go back on the shelf. At this point, I'm not even shelf reading. I'm just looking at the materials to make sure they are in good condition. Now, if in this process you should find any paper in the book, you're going to want to go ahead and pull that out. If it's something non-important like a library receipt, you can just go ahead and throw those away or recycle them. Every once in a while, though, we do find things that are important to our patrons. Sometimes we might find photos, paycheck stubs, bill receipts, or even sometimes a bookmark that maybe a child made. If you find those materials, please take them to staff, because we'd like to try to connect them with the patron that they belong to. So if you could take that material to the staff with information about what book it came from, we can work to get that back to the patron. Again, I'm just kind of checking book condition from the angles here. If you ever encounter a book that is sticky, sometimes the exterior has some residue on it, go ahead and just take a damp paper towel and kind of wipe that down, or one of these green rags. What we don't want is chemicals, though, so you might take a green rag and just get a little bit of water on it and wipe it down. Make sure it's good and dry before you put it back on the shelf. So we are doing okay on this. Actually, there's a little something, I can see it sticking out here. I like to hide in here. Some big things we're looking for on the books are some of the examples we showed earlier of damaged materials. So if you can see any water stains, if you see any books that look like the exterior's taken a great deal of damage, sometimes if you see that, then it's a good chance to kind of flip through and see if there's any interior damage as well. These books all looked great though, so I'm going to put the bookend back in place. I'm actually going to make sure that's clean too. And then I'm going to edge the books. So for that, what I tend to do is kind of put my hand to the front and slide all the books up to meet the edge of my hand. So they're in a nice neat row, all the labels are facing out, and they're all in a nice neat line so patrons can come and find those pretty easily. The final thing I'm going to do on my adopted shelves is shelf read. So now I'm going to start looking at all of the labels down here, making sure they're in the right genre, making sure they're in the right alphabetical order. Once I've got all of my authors in the right order, which there is one that doesn't belong here. So you can see we're in the mystery S's, and all of a sudden we jump to a mystery R. So we're going to pull that book off, and if you remember from our earlier training, we're either going to put that on the sorter or we're going to put it on one of those red carts. So I'm going to pull that one off. Once I pull that book off, I'm going to go ahead and tighten it up and keep on going. Now we do have a tricky one on this shelf. So as you can see, these are all in the correct alphabetical order, SLs, and then we've got an SM, which makes sense until you look at the shelf below. So the shelf below also starts with an SM, but it is SMIL, where our other example was SMIT. So we're actually going to need to pull that book from the shelf above and put it back because it does go into our collection. So I'm going to pull this one, and this is L. Smith, and I've got some other L. Smiths here, and I'm going to make sure it's in the proper title order. So we've got B, F, P. So now that I'm back to my top shelf again, I'm going to take a look. I've got them all in the correct author order and genre. So now I'm going to start taking a look at the titles to make sure that they are in the correct order. And once I get into these Sheltons here, I've actually got an issue. So the T for 2 actually counts in this because it's not one of the articles. So I'm going to pull it off and move it down. So if fried comes before if mashed. Now I'm ignoring the word A and just going with killer. So the K, H-I-J-K, all the way down to T. Now those are in the correct order. Now that all the books are in the correct order, I'm again going to tighten up my bookend here. And then I'm going to put the display book back in place and make sure that it does indeed go in this area. SK, yep, that would go in here. And put the display book on display again. Then I would just continue on down the shelves, cleaning and dusting, cleaning and dusting. When you get to the bottom shelf, you can, if you want, spray this bottom shelf since there won't be any overspray. That's fine. You also want to make sure you get the front of the shelf. This is a good place, especially if the shelves are white, where you can see a lot of scuff marks. And finally, a lot of times on the bottom shelf, there's a crossbar in the back, and that gets just as dirty as that top. So you'll want to make sure to hit that crossbar. This one doesn't have a good example of that, but most of them do. Finally, when you're down here, it's a good chance to just kind of reach in between the shelves and make sure no materials dropped down in between the shelves. Sometimes things like to hide down there. So now that the shelf is all clean and ready to go and everything's been shelf read, the last thing we're going to do is make note if there's any shelf damage. For that, it might be maybe the shelf is out of its bracket, or there's a big gouge or scratch in it, or something that didn't come up with the cleaning products we have. If you note anything like that, please just make a note of it on a piece of paper and put it in the damage bin. We'll be on the lookout for that. Whatever information you can give us is very helpful. So if you could say, well, it's in the mystery S's by the Smith shelves, we'll be able to find that and rectify that problem. This concludes our online portion of our training for the Adopt-A-Shelf role. Once you've completed watching these videos, please refer to the online training to decide your next steps. Thank you so much for joining our Adopt a Shelf program. You help keep our library looking beautiful and operating efficiently for the benefit of our patrons, our volunteers, and our staff. Thank you.